July 20th, 1969. Mission Control, Houston, Texas. The air thick with cigarette smoke and tension. In the front row, a man with slicked back hair and a crisp white shirt stares at the telemetry screens. His hands are steady now, but they weren't always. 25 years earlier, those same hands signed requisition orders for slave labor. Today, they're folded in prayer as Apollo 11 descends toward the Sea of Tranquility. In 6 minutes, the world will witness humanity's greatest achievement. But beneath the celebration, beneath the ticker tape and the presidential phone calls, lies a question no one in this room wants to answer. Can a rocket built on the bones of the dead carry us to redemption? His name is Wernher von Braun, and this is the price of reaching the stars. To understand how a Nazi engineer became America's hero, you need to go back to September 1944. London is burning, not from Luftwaffe bombers. Those raids have mostly stopped. This is something new, something worse. No air raid sirens, no engine roar, just silence, then impact. A supersonic scream followed by entire city blocks vaporized. The V-2 rocket, the world's first ballistic missile, traveling at 3,500 miles per hour, hitting targets 200 miles away. No defense, no warning, just terror falling from the edge of space. Between September 1944 and March 1945, 3,172 V-2 rockets were launched. Over 2,700 people died in London alone. Another 6,500 wounded. But those numbers don't include the secret massacre, the one that happened underground, in the darkness where the rockets were built. Wernher von Braun was born in 1912 in Wiersitz, Prussia, the son of a baron. While other aristocratic children studied Latin and horseback riding, young Wernher strapped fireworks to his toy wagon and launched it down Berlin streets, terrifying neighbors. He was arrested at 12. His mother bailed him out and bought him a telescope. He looked up and found his obsession: space. Not as science fiction, as engineering destiny. By 1932, at age 20, he was working for the German Army's rocket program at Kummersdorf. The Treaty of Versailles had banned Germany from developing long-range artillery, but it said nothing about rockets. Von Braun saw the loophole. More importantly, he saw the stars. His colleagues were building weapons. He was building spaceships that happened to explode. The Nazis saw potential. In 1937, they moved von Braun's team to Peenemünde, a remote island on the Baltic coast. Unlimited funding, unlimited ambition. Heinrich Himmler personally visited, SS uniform pressed, asking pointed questions about payload capacity. Von Braun answered them all. He needed the resources. Space required compromise. By 1942, the A-4 rocket, later renamed Vergeltungswaffe II, Vengeance Weapon II, was ready for testing. October 3, 1942, the first successful launch. The rocket climbed 53 miles, crossing the Kármán line, the boundary of space. Von Braun's team celebrated with champagne. Today, the spaceship was born, he reportedly said. But Albert Speer, Hitler's armaments minister, had a different vision. Not spaceships, missiles, mass production, terror. Here's where the elegance of engineering meets the machinery of death. The V-2 stood 46 feet tall, weighed 27,000 pounds fully fueled. Its engine burned liquid oxygen and ethanol, producing 56,000 pounds of thrust. Gyroscopic guidance kept it stable. Carbon veins in the exhaust stream steered it. At engine cutoff, 60 seconds after launch, it was traveling faster than sound, arcing toward the stratosphere. Then silence, free fall, gravity pulling it back to Earth at terminal velocity. The warhead, 1,650 pounds of Amitol explosive, detonated on impact. By the time you heard it coming, you were already dead. To produce these weapons at scale, the Nazis built Mittelwerk, a massive underground factory carved into the Konstein mountain near Nordhausen. 20,000 prisoners from the Mittelbau Dora concentration camp worked there. Jews, Soviet POWs, political prisoners, resistance fighters. They worked 12-hour shifts in freezing tunnels with no ventilation. They slept in barracks where typhus spread like wildfire. They ate 1,100 calories a day, starvation rations. They died at a rate of 100 per week from exhaustion, beatings, cave-ins, and disease. More people died building the V2 than were killed by it. Wernher von Braun visited Mittelwerk multiple times. He toured the tunnels in 1944. He saw the prisoners, skeletal men in striped uniforms, assembling the rockets he designed. He saw, and he said nothing. Years later, he would claim ignorance, call it regrettable, insist he had no authority over labor conditions, but the survivors remembered differently. They remembered the man in the clean coat, pointing at engine assemblies, discussing quality control while corpses were carried past on stretchers. April 1945. Nazi Germany is collapsing. The Soviets are closing in from the east, the Americans from the west. Von Braun makes a calculation: surrender to the Americans, not the Russians. He gathers his top engineers, over 500 of them, along with tons of documents, blueprints, and prototype parts. They flee south into the Bavarian Alps. On May 2, 1945, von Braun's younger brother Magnus approaches an American private from the 44th Infantry Division. "My name is Magnus von Braun. My brother invented the V2. We want to surrender." What happened next was Operation Paperclip, a secret U.S. program to recruit German scientists before the Soviets could. The moral calculus was cold. Nazi affiliations could be overlooked if the scientific value was high enough. Von Braun's SS membership? Sanitized from his file. His use of slave labor? Classified. His dreams of space? Suddenly aligned with American interests. And this is where the story takes a turn no one expected. But before we get to that, if you're finding this untold history as fascinating as I am, drop a comment below. Should von Braun have faced trial, or was Operation Paperclip justified? And hit that like button. It tells YouTube to recommend this to more history lovers like you. By 1950, von Braun and his team were at the U.S. Army's Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville, Alabama. They called themselves prisoners of peace, a joke that didn't land with everyone. The local Jewish community protested. Holocaust survivors wrote letters demanding his deportation. The Simon Wiesenthal Center called him a war criminal. But the Cold War had its own logic. The Soviets had their own German rocket scientists. The space race wasn't about morality. It was about who could put a warhead or a satellite into orbit first. Von Braun delivered. The Redstone rocket, the Jupiter C. And then, after the Soviets launched Sputnik in 1957 and humiliated America, von Braun got his chance. January 31, 1958. Explorer 1, America's first satellite, launched on von Braun's Juno 1. He held a model above his head at the press conference, grinning like a child. The rocket that proved space was reachable had finally reached it. In 1960, he became director of NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama. His assignment: build the rocket that would take humans to the moon. Not as revenge, as destiny. The Saturn V was the culmination of everything he'd learned, every failure at Peenemünde, every compromise at Mittelwerk, every dream scribbled in notebooks while London burned. It stood 363 feet tall, weighed 6.2 million pounds, produced 7.6 million pounds of thrust from 5 F1 engines. It remains the most powerful rocket ever flown. July 16, 1969.
Kennedy Space Center. Von Braun watches from the VIP stands as Apollo 11 lifts off. The ground shakes. The sound, a physical force, rattling chest cavities, drowning out thought. The Saturn V climbs, shedding stages, accelerating toward escape velocity. Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins are riding von Braun's dream into the void. 3 days later, the Eagle lunar module separates from the command module. Von Braun is back in Houston now, watching the telemetry. July 20, 1969, 4:17 p.m. Eastern Time. Armstrong's voice crackles through the static. The Eagle has landed. Mission control erupts. Engineers hug. Grown men cry. Wernher von Braun stands, applauds, his face unreadable. What is he thinking? Is he remembering Peenemünde? The slaves who died so he could perfect the engine that just landed on the moon? Or is he simply watching his life's work, the obsession that began with a telescope and fireworks, finally, impossibly succeed? 6 hours later, Armstrong steps onto the lunar surface. One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. The most watched television event in history. Over 600 million people see it. They see the American flag planted in moon dust. They see humanity transcend Earth. They don't see the shadows. They don't see Mittelbau Dora. But some people never looked away. In 1969, as the Apollo parades rolled through American cities, protesters held signs, "Nazi Space Program." Survivors of Mittelwerk gave interviews. One man, Jean-Michel, a French resistance fighter who survived the tunnels, dedicated his life to exposing von Braun. He wrote books, he testified, he demanded that the world remember. The V2 program killed 20,000 slave laborers. The rocket that took us to the moon was born from their suffering. If you believe these stories need to be told, no matter how uncomfortable, that like button is how we make sure history doesn't get sanitized. And make sure you're subscribed, because the next video covers Operation Paperclip's darkest secrets, the scientists America protected who should have stood trial. Von Braun never faced prosecution. He became a celebrity, Disney TV specials, magazine covers, presidential medals. He retired from NASA in 1972 and died of cancer in 1977, age 65. In his final years, he spoke carefully about Mittelwerk. He expressed regret. He called it tragic, but he never fully acknowledged complicity. He framed himself as an engineer caught in history's gears, a dreamer who needed monsters to fund his dreams. The question remains, do the ends justify the means? Does landing on the moon absolve the use of slave labor? Can genius erase atrocity? History doesn't answer, it only records. 20,000 dead in tunnels. 12 men walked on the moon because of the rockets perfected there. Both facts are true. Both facts are unbearable. Today, every orbital rocket, SpaceX, Blue Origin, China's Long March, owes a debt to the V2. The principles of liquid fuel propulsion, gyroscopic guidance, staged separation, all refined in those underground tunnels.
The International Space Station orbits because von Braun solved problems in Peenemünde. Mars rovers land because he proved ballistic trajectories could be controlled. The cost of that knowledge was paid in lives. He never mourned publicly enough. This is just one engineer's story, but it's the story of how we reach the stars. There are others, the Soviet designers who built Sputnik using German prisoners, the mathematicians like Katherine Johnson who corrected von Braun's math and never got credit until decades later. I've got those stories ready for you. Click that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and I'll see you in the next one. The man they called a war criminal, the rocket that killed thousands and carried mankind to the moon. The legacy we still can't reconcile.